I'm going to ponder a topic which has interested me for quite some time, and that's the Great Resignation. This Great Resignation has made headlines across the world. A lot of material, a lot of news on it coming out of the United States. Now, that may just be because the United States has very good job market data. So we've seen in the data this big surge in resignations following the hard lockdowns of 2020. There are various theories on what drives the Great Resignation. It seems that some believe that during times of a crisis, the lockdown period, the pandemic, a more stressful time, there's a portion of the workforce that reassesses its life, reevaluates, takes stock, and comes to the conclusion that they're not going down an ideal path. They need better work-life balance, better quality of life, better well-being, whatever it might be. And that this resignation is a sign that some have gone off in search for it. Now, that could be the case, or it could just be because in part, because the United States has reached very high levels of employment. So employees are in the pound seats, and you can resign and you can move jobs relatively easy in a high employment situation. But there are signs too that a significant portion of them go off to do their own thing, to be entrepreneurial. There's been something of an entrepreneurial surge as well. So the question I've pondered to myself for some time is, will the Great Resignation in some many form reach South Africa? And about 2 weeks ago, when I introduced the latest FNB property broker survey, I pointed to property brokers perceiving a decline in vacancy rates in the three major commercial property sectors: office, industrial, and most notably retail. In some of their answers, they also perceive a significant increase in the emergence of small businesses, some being new entrepreneurial type startups. And I just wondered to myself whether that isn't some small evidence or hint that the Great Resignation has come to South Africa too, that not only are people moving jobs a bit more on the highly skilled side, but also perhaps becoming more entrepreneurial too, searching for a better quality of life in some way, whether it be the satisfaction of being an entrepreneur or the flexibility that it offers. So I posed that question. Last week, lo and behold, what do I see but an article from IT Online talking exactly about that, mooting the idea that the Great Resignation has reached South Africa's shores, and quoting some data from Old Mutual's REM channel platform, pointing towards a very significant increase in staff turnover. So it seems as though there's hints of it moving South Africa's way. Now, the first thing people are going to say is, no, surely not. South Africa is a country with a high unemployment rate. It's very different to the United States. That is true. But that's the overall unemployment rate, and that's mainly in the less skilled segments of the population. Very difficult to see them just job jumping or moving jobs easily in a high unemployment situation. I think they're more desperate to hold on to what jobs they have. But on the highly skilled side, that's not necessarily the case. South Africa is short on skills, on highly skilled labor. And I think if we could split the data up into skills segments, we'd find at the top end of the skills distribution or skills ladder, we'd find a much lower unemployment rate. So it's conceivable that in the highly skilled section of the population, there could be significant increases in movement. What would that movement be? Well, sometimes to another company. What would they be in search of? Well, often just better, it can be for increased remuneration, but it seems as though there's noise that some people want greater flexibility when they are employees, when they work for an employer, greater flexibility to work remotely, to work in the office when they feel like, not to be so rigid, to work remotely as well. And it's possible that you can work remotely nowadays, because what the lockdown period did was forced many of our industries to give it a bash on a large scale, and we found that the work from home experiment worked amazingly well. Big divisions of big corporates often working almost fully from home during the hard lockdown periods. It was a rousing success, forced the late adopters to give the technology that was always there or had been there before COVID a try. So employee mobility has increased quite significantly. And it's conceivable that people can work from the Western or Southern Cape for a boss in Johannesburg, or even a boss in some far-flung city such as London. But then, of course, it may be that we want to move off and become entrepreneurial and do our own thing, as we call it in corporate circles. The gig economy is much talked about, and the increase in the size of the gig economy, although I don't know how one measures it in a country like South Africa, but there is noise that a greater portion of the workforce desires to and is getting sucked up into the gig economy. So it's a shift as well with all of this towards greater or more flexible and more adaptable type of working arrangements and employment contracts between employer and employee in the case where people are employed by an employer. That seems to be what's coming out of this as the workforce looks for greater well-being, greater quality of life, greater work-life balance, and skills are in short supply, relatively short supply. Employers are in many instances having to adapt to the changing labor market. I think it's realistic, therefore, that in South Africa this should happen in the highly skilled segment, just like it seems to be happening in certain developed countries such as the United States. Why wouldn't it? We've gone through the same pandemic. We've got the same technology. In many cases these days, our economies are so interlinked, and they follow the same cycles, and they follow the same similar ways of thinking in certain ways. So why wouldn't it be realistic for it to reach South Africa's shores? Who are the beneficiaries of it? Well, I think certain regions are the beneficiaries of it. Certain more far-flung commuter towns away from the big cities, which offer a more peaceful existence, can benefit from a greater, what we call, semigrant population that doesn't have to be in the big city as often for, be it business meetings or for work, as what it used to. And I think we've seen that more so in Western Cape towns, where it's not only about the city of Cape Town metro now. You've also seen the semigration drive moving outwards down the Southern Cape way towards George and Mossel Bay and the like, and up the west coast as well. And even last week, one of my favorite articles that I saw last week was an article, a detailed article in Daily Maverick about Karoo towns starting to blossom in certain instances too, also from the semigrant population. Not only remote workers or entrepreneurs, but also retirees looking for a better quality of life. So there can be a significant regional shift of highly skilled and more affluent people, and it can benefit not only big cities, but it can benefit smaller towns as well, some of them in need of a bit of an economic boost after perhaps in previous years having lost the reason as to why they existed, as agriculture might have declined or some other industry might have stagnated. So a big boost for certain rural towns that have been able to reinvent themselves as popular semigrant destinations.